All right, well, sorry about that. The joys of recording new material. So I apologize for the little cutout there as I got warning messages about lacking space on my camera. Um, but hopefully I can wrap up what I needed to talk about for this chapter pretty quickly, and we'll uh, be able to start over again on the next module. Um, but suffice it to say, we ought to respect dignity by not harming others and by promoting the true good of others to the extent that we can, right? And I think, again, as I just mentioned, sometimes it can be difficult to discern what the true good is. But I do think um, that what it ultimately boils down to, in some real sense, is, of course, love, right? And that what really fulfills a person who is in the image of a God who um, is love of others, right? And so we should act in such a way that we both love and that we encourage and allow others the opportunity to love as well, right? And I think this is one of the places that is interesting in terms of looking at how different Christian traditions and different perspectives can challenge our typical understanding, right? And I talked, I think, last time about some of the value that can come from engaging with Eastern Christianity and their understanding of different aspects of the faith. And this is another place where I think that is true, right? Western thinking is very traditionally individualistic, right? That we tend to focus on the individual as a distinct sort of self-contained reality. And then we see the relationships of these individuals as extras added on to this person, the individual who is sort of the building block of reality or human reality at least. Um, Eastern thinking, both Eastern Christianity and also other Eastern traditions from other religious and philosophical traditions, um, tend to be much more focused on relationships and community, and that it's the relationships and community that actually form the foundation for the individuals, right? And this is obviously a really big, broad topic in history and in philosophy and in comparative philosophy. Um, but I do think it's something that is worth reflecting on, right? And that if we kind of step back from our sort of Greco-Roman roots, if you will, and look at other ways of thinking about the human person, um, we can see maybe things that add a different perspective to our understanding of what it is to truly be a person, right? It can help us appreciate this idea that love is really sort of not just the ultimate goal, but also the ultimate foundation of what it is to be a person, and that you can't, in fact, be a true full person in isolation, right? That the divine persons are kind of the ultimate example of what it is to be a person, and they are literally defined as persons by their relationships to one another. And I think one can argue that in a real way, the same ought to be and is true of us, right? That we are shaped by our relationships in ways that are, I would argue, much more profound than most Western American people are going to think, right? We just tend to be, by the nature of our own history and our context, very individualistic, right? Even if you go back to before Aquinas, if we go back to like a figure like Boethius, who's an important thinker in the late ancient world, um, right? He defines the person as a individual substance of a rational nature, right? And that idea of rooting personhood uh, defining it as individual and defining it as rational rather than relational. Certainly, there are reasons he does that, and there's a lot of truth in Boethius's definition. But I think, as with most things in theology, um, no one statement is going to capture everything, right? And I think that Western emphasis on individuality can lead us to minimize or not fully appreciate the importance of relationships and love um, in what it is to be truly human and what it is to truly succeed or to attain our true good. So that's just something I would ask us to keep reflecting on as we go through this material. And then finally, in this chapter, Waddell pushes a little bit further, which is again going to be maybe uncomfortable for us in our particular contexts, particularly maybe for those with a more conservative American socio-political economic view, right? He's going to say um, that we are not just isolated individuals from other people, we are also not isolated individuals separated from the rest of creation, right? And while not denying a unique position for human beings in creation as a whole, right? This isn't to say that the human being is equal in value to a dolphin or a redwood. Um, but it also, as Waddell talks about in this final part of the chapter 3, um, that human persons aren't separate from and distinct from the rest of the created world. That we also have uh, an intrinsic relationship to our environment, right? That we can't live without it, um, and that we ought to promote the good of all of creation, just as we try to promote the good of other people, or in a way, I guess, analogous to, right? So we don't have the same moral obligation to a plant or an animal that we do to another person, but we do have some obligation to promote the good of the rest of the created world. And again, this follows from Genesis, right? God puts Adam and Eve in his place as stewards of creation, right? They are called to care for creation and to continue God's creative work in the world, to bring the world to its true fulfillment, right? And if we are made in the image of a God who is a loving creator, who glories in and enjoys his creation, then we are called to do the same thing in order to fulfill our own nature, right? And again, this is one of those places where um, the morality has gotten tangled up with our particular American political context, and where um, a focus on the environment puts you, in many cases, in a very specific political camp that may not be comfortable with many other aspects of Catholic teaching, right? And it's important to remember that Catholic teaching is not built in or shaped by American politics, right? That we can affirm sort of that unique dignity of a human person in a way that doesn't fit some American politics. And at the same time, we affirm the goodness of the created world and are called to be loving stewards of it in a way that doesn't fit American politics, right? And so I think Waddell actually expresses that pretty well, but I also know that it can be very difficult, especially in 2025, to break out of sort of our standard political lenses and look at these things in terms of the theology, in terms of Catholic morality, because I think what he presents there is very much in line with, obviously, he draws a lot on Pope Francis and Laudato Si, which, again, some Catholics are critical of. If you look at Laudato Si, it really just builds on and continues a line of thought that traces back to Pope Benedict, Pope John Paul II, and the larger tradition. But I will leave that for now before my computer flakes out again. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on Chapter 3 and these videos as well.